they have a statistic where they said at the end of 2020, there was 108% increase of online child exploitation.
How did you get into this conversation, human trafficking, and um, did that is that what led you into your work at Baylor, or did that start afterwards, or what?
Kind of both, and because I finished my PhD at Baylor University, and then my husband and I moved to California, to San Diego, and I was an
Mm.
assistant professor at California Baptist University. He was just working in the business world, but it was actually out there that I heard Christine Kane speak. She's speaker, writer, Christian leader. But she has an organization, the H21 campaign, which fights human trafficking domestically and globally. And I heard her speak at our church. And I think, like most people, when you first hear about human trafficking, this was 10 years ago. But you're appalled, you're sort of shocked. It's hard to fathom that in this day and age,
Mm.
people are exploited for profit.
Yeah.
Really, human trafficking is the oldest crime in humanity. People have been
Correct.
exploiting others for profit. So that's not new. I think just so we feel like we're such a just society, and to know how pervasive this is, and that it's actually a growing problem,
Yeah.
particularly with online child, exploitation and child exploitation.
Mhm.
That is new. Humanity has been sinful since the beginning of time. We have looked to raise exploit each other, but the internet and all of its, different, milieus is new. That is new.
Yeah.
We've never
Yeah.
exploited people online before, or made it so easy and so pervasive. So when I first heard about that 10 years ago, I think I just decided at that point in time, this dovetails well with what I'm already doing as far as education research. I just want to make education prevention research with human trafficking my research focus. So from there, did several studies on anti-trafficking prevention research curriculum, helped the A21 campaign launch their curriculum for high school students, and have just been involved ever since in raising awareness, talking about prevention measures, being connected to some organizations that do restoration, rehabilitation, and restoration with victims.
Mhm.
So yeah, we actually moved back to Waco a couple of years ago after living in San Diego, and started teaching at Baylor University again after that.
Oh,
So
wow. Okay. Wow. I mean, we've talked about this in multiple episodes before, just as far as trafficking, in general, child trafficking. 2 episodes ago, we had a specialist on regarding child trafficking, and I think the moment you begin to talk about it, or at least learn a little bit about it, one major thing pops out: the grotesque, disproportionate um, balance of the proliferation of trafficking in the world versus people's knowledge of it. Like, it's extremely widespread. Meanwhile, very little people know about it. Why do you think that is?
yeah, I think maybe because I've been so immersed in this, I don't find as many people anymore who don't know about human trafficking, as much as they just have the wrong conceptions, like they're just misinformed, or they don't understand, or they don't know how, like, pervasive it is. But 10 years ago, when I first started researching and talking about this, I would say I encountered a lot of people who would claim, like, oh, trafficking doesn't happen in America, or it definitely doesn't happen in my
Mm.
city. That's something that just happens in a third world country. And less I'm finding that to be true, because I think there's been enough awareness around this. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with the End It campaign, or the Giglio, Shelley and Louis Giglio have
Yeah.
the Passion movement. They've been really big about raising awareness. So I think there's been enough awareness that people are like, okay, human trafficking is real. Where there is still some misconceptions is people think that it always looks like the movie Taken, and like very rarely are people kidnapped into human trafficking and sex trafficking. More, they're tricked, they're coerced
Yeah.
into it. In fact, that's one of the definitions of human trafficking, is if you've been tricked, coerced into it, whether it's labor trafficking or sex trafficking. Specifically, since we're talking about families and kids, and you read the Ali Stuckey quote, one of the most discouraging stats that I had heard during 2020 when we all went into lockdown is, and this is coming from the National Center of Exploitation of Children. They do a lot of like the missing children campaign, but they have a statistic where they said at the end of 2020 there was 108% increase of online child exploitation compared to
Wow.
2019. Right. Now, some of that, very small percentage, but some of that is children exploiting themselves unwittingly. Like like people are asking for pictures and they don't know better, or, through video games. But the vast majority, and this is where it just is so hard to even articulate this, but it is the exploitation of a trusted adult. It's,
Wow.
a loved one, right? So yeah, so I think when Ali Buff Stuckey says like it's a founded concern when she says like we really don't value children. Now I think that's a kind of a generalization because there are a lot of people, particularly people in the church, who are working to combat sex trafficking and the exploitation of children. So there are people out there, but I would argue you can't really combat sex trafficking without also addressing pornography.
Yeah.
And pornography is addictive. I mean, this is not just me talking, like research shows
Yeah.
that is the number one variable of people who are caught selling and buying is pornography.
Mm.
No one just wakes up one day and decides to sell somebody or buy somebody. The pornography addiction that's correlated to that.
Wow.
Right now, let me be clear. Not everybody who struggles with pornography will then engage in sex trafficking.
Right.
However, people who engage in sex trafficking are engaged in pornography.
Yeah.
And the the Indit movement, Fight the New Drug, is a great, if your listeners are not familiar with them, I don't know for sure. I want to say they're actually a Mormon organization, but either way, they're doing great awareness around how dangerous pornography consumption is, particularly when it comes to exploitation of women and children.